Hi everybody, welcome to this mini lecture that is part of the virtual classroom of today, and it's going to be about the present and future of coffee sensory experience. We're going to start off with the preferences of coffee. So what is your preferred coffee and what is your perception of its taste, of one or more basic tastes? What are your expectations about it? What are its flavor attributes? Usually using other food items to describe it, so fruits or spices, for example. And lastly, what is its mouthfeel? So how viscous is it, and is its texture rather a smooth one or rather a rough one? And what else is there aside from caffeine? Where do you want to go? What is the ultimate goal of coffee? It should be customer enjoyment, not just about satisfaction. So what do consumers enjoy drinking in terms of beverages, in terms of flavor and taste balance, in terms of body and mouthfeel, and in terms of the overall experience of it? So regarding beverage preferences, you could group most of the coffee beverages into 4 categories. There's the well-known milk and foam dominated version that is sold all over the world by now. Then you have the more traditional milk and sugar added, usually long cup of coffee. Then you have the long and black one that is usually filter coffee. And on the lastly but not least, you have the short and viscous espresso. It has usually a low to medium acidity. Bitterness is often quite not necessarily dominant, but is quite strong in it. And it's all about the mouthfeel there and the intensity also. Then in terms of the aroma and flavor attribute spectrum, you have on the one side, you have the more traditional flavors that give you an intense and roasty flavor experience. Traditionally, you could find descriptors such as malt, chocolate, or nuts in it. A bit less common are the specialty flavors. Usually they're more fruity and characterized by a lower bitterness. Descriptors you could find there are, for example, plum, blackcurrant, jasmine, or the coffee flower. Then in terms of the taste spectrum, you could roughly group it into 3 categories. You have the traditional bitter tolerant or even bitter liking segment. You have the mild and smooth segment, usually also in combination with milk. Lastly, you have the acidity tolerant and novelty seeking segment. That is something that is still quite small in absolute terms, but shows quite a strong relative growth in the recent years. Then the mouthfeel spectrum can be categorized by the coffee being pure or with milk. That's already quite a strong distinction. The viscosity, or how heavy it is mostly TDS driven. So on the more dilute side, you have filter coffee, then mocha pot or the Bialetti is in the medium range, and espresso is in the high TDS range because it's also the most concentrated coffee beverage of those. And it's also about being thin or rather creamy or heavier. Then lastly, the texture itself, not just the body but also the texture, is about being rather silky, or on the other extreme if it's rather an astringent one. Usually consumers are not a big fan of astringency, but there's also quite a few outliers, and I guess anybody who's familiar with drinking white wine also knows that some beverages astringency is an inherent part of their flavor and taste experience. Then we also have the experiential spectrum that is more about the setting where you consume your coffee in. So it's about comfort and well-being often. You could play a lot with light and colors, with the background music, so the sound and the arrangement and physical build of the floor influences your experience heavily. Then there's also the play on whether or not you want to put your customer in an environment that is rather familiar to him or that is rather novel. So it's about the difference or distinction between comfort or excitement, especially people who are actively seeking a learning experience or are even enjoying to consume something that might be even a bit shocking or enlightening to them, is something that is growing in general. And as you could see from the lower picture, some specialty shops really have a bit odd decorations, but I guess this is part of their charm or of their distinction of being something that you might have never seen in any other place before. Experience It's also influenced by the type of vessel you choose. Here are some results from a study from Carvalho and Spence from 2019 about cup sleeves. And so they investigated what influence the cup sleeve has on the experience of your coffee, or actually on the flavor of the coffee. Cardboard sleeves, for example, led to more bitter taste impressions, so they were best match for black coffee. A towel sleeve led to a more sweet or a higher intensity of sweetness, was a best match for rather creamy flavors. Then a stainless steel or silicone sleeve was a best match with sourness because it accentuated the acidity. And lastly, the linen sleeve was the best match with salty, but as salty is not something that you usually want to have too much of in your coffee, I guess this is not really a great option. So the second part of this mini lecture will deal with new coffee flavors, so sources of new and popularity gaining flavors. First off, I want to talk about species flavor. So far, people have mostly used different varieties of Arabica. For example, Geisha has been used a lot in competitions because of its distinct flavor. But if you step outside of Arabica and actually use other species, for example, Coffea stenophylla and Coffea aeugenoides, you can include a lot more flavors that are actually not occurring at all in Arabica. Coffea stenophylla received some attention via a video from James Hoffman, where he was copying it and liked it a lot. And there it was not so much about having completely new flavors, but it was also the fact that this plant can take a lot more heat than Arabica does, and so this might be a good possibility to actually replace the Arabica areas that will become kind of unproductive in the future because it's simply getting too hot for Arabica. Then a second species that has also been used recently is Coffea aeugenoides. At WBC in Milan, the World Barista Championship, actually the first, second and third competitor was using aeugenoides, not for all of their beverages, but for at least one of them. And this introduced some really new flavors. Coffea aeugenoides, for example, often had notes of stevia or of some cooked vegetables, or also some salty notes in it that do not commonly occur in any of the Arabica coffees. I think apart from new flavors that it introduced, aeugenoides is also interesting because it has a higher fat content, and from the few samples we also tasted in the lab, you could really feel that it had a silkiness to it, probably due to its increased fat content that is not present in any of the Arabica coffees. Processing flavor has also been a hot topic in recent years. There was this case of the apple pie and cinnamon coffee that is El Diamante, from a coffee from Costa Rica. It has been processed by what they call an anaerobic fermentation. And people have actually doubted whether or not these kind of flavors can naturally occur in coffee, or if this is actually more of an artificial introduction by some sort of additives. When it was first introduced into the coffee world in Cup of Excellence 2018, they actually did a lab analysis, and for example, at least ethylcinnamate, the main flavor component of cinnamon, couldn't be found in there, but people nevertheless doubted whether this flavor spectrum of brown sugar, cinnamon, clove, dark chocolate and caramelized apple, if this really can occur naturally in a coffee. And also other coffees have been showing extremely intense fruity flavors in the past, and people are more and more questioning whether or not this should have to be labeled and clearly declared what they did to the coffee. There's more and more special processes. Most of them are being called anaerobic fermentation, but it's yet mostly intransparent what people do in detail during that anaerobic fermentation. Some farmers, they openly admitted to having added things like citrus peel or spices to their coffee, while others denied or remained secret about their exact process. So I think it's really about being transparent, because there definitely could be, or there definitely is, a market segment that doesn't mind if people add other ingredients to the fermentation, but there's also the segment of the purists that would rather not buy any of these coffees. So making it transparent really gives the consumer the option of opting in or out of these kind of coffees. And ultimately, it's also a discussion about natural or engineered flavor that is also known from the wine industry. I remember this very nice presentation from Isabelle Legeron. She's a master of wine who told this story about natural versus traditional wine. So natural wine is a wine that is using the naturally occurring microorganisms to ferment the wine, to produce the alcohol. So they use the naturally occurring yeast and other bacteria to ferment the wine, whereas traditional wine that often boasts about being very specific to the terroir, the region where it's grown and its microclimate, is actually often more a product of a highly industrialized process that is using a very specific artificially grown yeast to come up with the specific flavor spectrum that they have. So often in the wine industry, people are not very honest about what kind of process they're using, and she just suggested that in the coffee industry, we're still kind of one step away from getting there, and people should think long and hard about whether or not they want to go down this road and how to communicate this to the consumer ultimately. In the outlook, we could see that sensory science has added to the flavor and taste more sensory experiences. So interdisciplinary and multisensory experiences have also entered not just science, but also the competitions. It's about better understanding the consumers, what kind of beverages they actually like the most. I think ethical and sustainable consumer demands come on top of the sensory expectations. And from my point of view, this has come to stay, and it's not very likely that this is going to go away anytime soon. And new emerging coffee markets such as South America, China, India, and also countries in Southeast Asia form a completely new form of consumer preferences, where it's not well known yet what kind of beverages they will go for the most. So thanks for listening, and see you around.